And it is one of the most difficult to answer. So we're really gonna challenge me here with this one. So the question that we received is any advice around a boss who passes my ideas on to my peer for them to deliver and present to senior management? Oof. One, your boss needs some coaching and you should give them my contact information. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. So this is a hard one, right? Because you have great ideas. You have the ability to execute, and yet you're not being given that opportunity as things are being handed to your peer instead. So part of this is going to be that I think you need to have a direct conversation. Welcome back to Secrets of a Corporate Game. So many people are trying to navigate a corporate world that is laden with secrets, cleverly hidden and unspoken rules to a game that most employees don't even know they're playing. On this podcast, we try to give you a peek behind the curtain and unveil some of those secrets with tips and tricks that you can apply today to start taking control of your career and progress up the ladder faster. Hey everybody, I am so unbelievably excited for this episode. As I had mentioned a few weeks ago across all of my social media channels, as well as on an earlier episode, you can now go to my website, thatcareercoach.net, and submit your questions, your requests for advice anonymously, and I will answer them on a podcast episode. So once a month, I'm going to be coming here to the podcast to answer your asked questions with the context that I have. So my goal is that these episodes would be tactical, they would be helpful, they would resonate with some of you guys who are tuning in, even if it isn't your submitted question, but also it would be a little bit of unfiltered corporate advice, right? It may not always be the thing you wish you would hear, but it'll be the thing that's going to help you the most in your career. And now I'm rhyming, like Dr. Seuss. So on today's episode, we're going to have 4 different questions that have been submitted through the website. I will also link the website below in case you hear this episode and you think, oh my gosh, I definitely need to do this. The goal is that this would be a great chance for you to get some anonymous help. So we're going to kick off with the very first question. So the first question was how to understand which career path I should be picking when I'm not very sure. What links or guidance could be followed to figure out the right profile in the market for you to switch and apply for? So this is a really great question. I know it is affecting a lot of people, especially because there have been so many layoffs, especially in big tech lately, which don't we all love that, which we could have a whole separate episode about how I feel about those layoffs. But what I would say is picking your career path, I think people put a lot of pressure on it, right? We feel like we have to pick the right career path for us, and then we stick to that career path for the rest of our lives, right? And we think often of our career as a ladder, as a vertical. We go from one job to the next job to the next job, straight up the chain, when in reality, most people's careers is more like a lattice. You may take a diagonal job into a different division and then come across laterally and then move up vertically and then go back out at an angle. So one, I would say, take this with a grain of salt, but picking the right career, you're probably going to change careers a few times. So I wouldn't put too much stress on it, all right? In my personal experience, I started my degree was in mathematics. I started in finance and analytics and data science, transitioned into more like construction management, then transitioned into running a call center. Then I ran a tech team. Now I run tech strategy, right? So I've held a lot of careers theoretically within my time in corporate. And so take a breath. It'll be okay. But when it does come to picking the next job for you, there's a few things I like to do. So first off, you need to understand what you're good at. So I did a whole podcast episode a few weeks ago about how to understand your best skills and build your personal brand. So I won't spend too much time on that. But what I would say is when you understand what you are both good at and enjoy doing, you can better position yourselves for jobs that are going to be satisfying. So one of the exercises I do with my clients is I'll have you write out 3 passion statements. So these are things that are not task related at work. We don't want to say, I love working in Excel. Even if you do, I love Excel. I think it's one of the best things ever made. But you don't want that to be your passion statement. Think more soft skill oriented, people oriented, leadership oriented. What are the 3 things you do at work that really fill your cup and leave you feeling proud and happy and satisfied at the end of the day? once you have those 3 passion statements, those become the criteria by which you evaluate future jobs. So if your 3 passion statements are you love to collaborate, you want every day to look different, and you're passionate about leading people, there are tons of different quote unquote careers that fit those 3 things that you can seek. But what it also means is that you should not take any job that doesn't offer you all 3 of those things, right? So if the first tip is don't take your career selection too seriously, the second tip is understand what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and make sure that the jobs you're applying for and that you ultimately accept align really well with those 2 things. And then the third piece is figure out what your other requirements are. Okay, I would be remiss if I did not focus on the financial aspect of a job, right? A big reason lots of us take a job is because of the money. So what I would say is there are certain industries and certain job types that pay more. So if money is a big motivator for you, I would focus on financial services or fintech. They tend to be some of the highest paying industries. Technology is another one, very high paying. Some of the lower paying tend to be healthcare, retail, right? Now you get different things with retail and healthcare. You get resiliency, right? The market tends to be much more stable in those environments. Not to say there aren't layoffs, but because no matter how little money people have, they're still going to need healthcare and they're still going to end up going shopping for clothes. So you have a little more resiliency in those markets than you do in, say, tech or financial services. But you have a much higher pay scale, right? So one of the things I did early on in my career is I started in retail, I moved to technology, and then I pivoted to financial services where I've been ever since. This is because that's where the money is, and that's a priority, right? So part of it is I would understand the monetary aspect. In my opinion, and this may be unpopular, you can learn any industry, right? There's no type of work that can't be taught. And so when you think of picking where you want to work, money is going to be a big factor, right? Now, that being said, if you're really passionate about healthcare, you really want to help people, you care about health and fitness, that's a huge priority for you, then obviously you should work in that industry, right? So with this third tip, I would say find balance between the things that are driving you. Another big one that I hear a lot is insurance coverage, especially in the United States. So if you're looking to get pregnant and you want a really strong maternity leave, maybe that's something that you're looking for when you look at these companies. When maybe you need help with IVF, right? Some companies will pay for you to have IVF. So what are those companies? So think of what are the other aspects that are driving you? Maybe you want to work from home. So you only want to look at companies that offer work from home, right? So when it comes to picking the next step in your career, figure out what you're good at, figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what's important to you so that you target the right companies, and then don't take that next move too seriously. Odds are you're going to be up and out in the next 2 years anyways. So it doesn't have to be the perfect job, but we also don't want it to be a bad job or a bad job fit. So that's the direction that I would take if you were looking to figure out what your next steps are going to be. I would also, once you think you have a clear direction, so say you've decided, hey, I'm going to apply for fintech companies with great healthcare that are remote. They're going to allow me to be collaborative, every day be different, and get to lead people, right? So this is like our 6 factors that we're going to take into consideration when we look for a new job. Then I would connect with people on LinkedIn, say, hey, I saw that you work in fintech. I'm thinking about switching industries. Would you mind having a 15-minute chat? We could talk about it. People love to talk. They love to, especially about themselves. So give them an opportunity, right? If you want to learn more about fintech, do reach out to people, get some information. Then maybe you decide within fintech you want to target Salesforce because they have great benefit package. Great. Then meet with somebody at Salesforce and say, calling Salesforce a fintech is a bit of a stretch, but roll with it for the sake of the example. Then meet with somebody at Salesforce. Say, hey, I've heard great things about your company culture. I've heard that you guys offer these benefits. Would you talk to me a little bit about your experience? Right? Do your research. A lot of times we're afraid to reach out to people because they'll say no. And if they say no, you just reach out to somebody else. But a lot of the time, like I get messages, hey, I heard you work for this company. I'd love to hear more about it. Would you hop on a 15-minute call? Sure. I'm happy to talk with people about my experience. So then do your research. It'll also help you build connections internally so that when you apply, maybe you can get a referral. And that's kind of the networking piece, which if you want to get more information about networking, go back and check out the episode that I did with Diana YK Chan. It is all about how to network both virtually and in person. It is an impeccable episode. So go back and listen to that. But yes, those are the tips that I have if you are looking to find the next step in your career. Going on to question number 2 is, what do you do when you're having a meeting with someone who's much more senior than you and you feel overworked and undervalued? What do you talk about that's actually going to add value to that conversation? So my big piece of advice, anytime you're having career progression conversations or you're meeting with individuals who have a lot of seniority above you, is first, do not take problems that cannot be solved. Okay, and that's going to sound like harsh advice. Okay, but odds are going to them and saying, I'm overworked is not a problem that they're going to solve. It's just not. But if you go to them and you say, hey, I feel that my team is very under-resourced. I think we need to add 2 FTEs to our team, 1 more junior and 1 more senior who would handle these tasks in order to make us successful. It's a much more productive conversation, right? I think if you are going to have those conversations, you also should have already had them with your boss and your boss's boss, right? Don't skip 4 levels ahead and say, hey, my team is understaffed and we've never had these conversations, right? Do a little CYA here. But what I would say is, if you're going to take a problem to somebody that's senior, take them a problem that can be solved with a solution. The second piece of this is, if you feel like you're undervalued, how much of that is you advocating for yourself? Right? Something that I work with all of my clients on, I spend a lot of time with them on, is how do we make sure that your boss and their boss and their boss are all aware of the work that you're doing in your seat? Do they feel that you're an important, valued member of the team? Some of that is your responsibility. I know we all expect, well, my boss just knows all this stuff I'm doing. I send it to my boss. Of course they're aware. Why aren't they telling their boss and their boss's boss that I've done all this great work? They're not just sitting around with a bunch of free time thinking about how they can advocate for you. Now, good bosses should be doing this, right? Good bosses do go out of their way to give recognition and awareness to the individuals on their team. But you are also responsible for advocating for yourself and for taking control of your career. One of the things I'm working through with a particular client right now is, we have a tendency when we're more junior to wait for people to tell us what to do, to wait for people to tell us why something is important, to give us the context. As you become more senior, one of the skills that you develop is, how do you tell your boss what's important? And how do you start to advocate for what you want with your boss? And so I'm answering this question in 2 parts. Part 1 is, if you want to go to your executive and complain, bring them solutions. I'm overworked because of X. We could fix it by doing Y. And maybe you give them a couple different Ys, a couple different options. I'm undervalued because I'm delivering all of this work and I don't feel like anybody knows it. But the second piece of this is that you are responsible for the people who know what you're doing. It is your responsibility to show up at work and to say, hey, I just want to let you know, over the last 2 weeks, I've delivered these 10 things. Right? And sometimes it's easy for us to lose sight of that because we feel like our work is so high visibility, it's so high value, everybody already knows about it. We don't want to beat a dead drum. I feel like I just combined some sayings there, but you get what I'm saying. But even me, I realized this year there were some things in Q4 that my team did, because it's our job and it's our responsibility, that I hadn't informed my boss. And it wasn't until he said, hey, we need to make sure these 3 things happen, that I was like, we already did those, right? Those all got done with huge groups involved. But I'm realizing that in effect, to be autonomous and operate independently, he was uninformed of the effort carried out by my team. And so in 2024, one of the things I'm doing is sending that monthly recap. Hey, this month, here are the big wins from my team. Here are the big risks that we foresee and the potential things that may change. How do you keep them informed of what's going on? Obviously, all of our conversations in our one-on-one, some things still fell through the cracks. So how do you make sure that you're staying on top of that? So again, maybe not the answer that you were looking for when it comes to how do you make sure that you have a conversation with your executive that's going to help you get what you want. But what I would do is make sure that you're not just giving them issues, but you also take ownership for the components that you have control over. Question number 3. What advice do you have towards a manager that excessively controls the team, is doing work a level below theirs, therefore pushing the rest of the team down, and when we ask for ownership opportunities gets very defensive, saying that they need to lead everything because of leadership pressure? A little extra context. We have a new leader who our boss is actually scared of. Historically, I've been a high performer that received consistently strong performance reviews, but this is really hurting my growth potential and I'm working to find a new role, but that may take some time. What do I do in the interim? So I think this is a great question. Again, there are a few things that we're going to do to really address this all at once. So the first part is your boss is being a micromanager, not necessarily because they want to, but because of external pressures. So I've given this advice before on lives and some other context, but one of the things I love to do when I have a micromanager is say, hey, I've noticed you've been reaching out for a lot more updates lately than normal. What would you like me to be doing proactively to ensure that you remain informed and have the level of detail that you need? A lot of the time managers become micromanagers is because they feel like they're in the dark. They don't understand what's going on. They don't feel like they know where everything is. They're afraid that mistakes are going to happen. And then in this case, their boss is going to yell at them. And so they start to get in the weeds of a lot of things that they aren't really necessarily supposed to be focused on. So what can you do proactively to help them feel a little bit more at peace? That's one piece. I think the other thing is if I were you, I'd build a really strong relationship with their boss. Yes, the scary one. When we have a leader who intimidates us or who has a lot of strength or a very specific way of operating, or they like to see a very certain level of detail, the better your relationship is with that person, the better you're going to operate. And so if your skip level is that person who has all these demands, all of these thoughts, great. Start meeting with them on a quarterly basis to understand how can you better assist the team. Where do you fit in the scale of things? How can your skills that you've identified be of value to them? What are their top 3 goals in the next 3 years? Once you understand how the skip level thinks and how they operate, you'll be better situated to help them as well. What I often see happen in this particular circumstance is as you build a better relationship with the skip level, they're going to start assigning you work directly, right? Even if they are scary and your boss is intimidated, that might be because your boss does not have a good relationship with them. It may not have anything to do with that person specifically. So if you can build a good relationship with them, a lot of the time it'll give you exposure and opportunity to things outside of your visibility, outside of your scope, that will help you be successful long-term and get those growth opportunities. So making sure you're building the relationship with the skip, making sure that you are documenting your proactive updates for your boss so that they feel that they know what's going on. And then if you are a high performer and this is holding you back, I would say not only to be looking for opportunities externally, but start looking for opportunities internally as well. Right? Where are there cross-functional teams that you could work on that maybe short-term you start doing some projects for them side of desk and long-term that's a transition? Are there leadership training programs that you can attend that are funded by your company? Are there technical skills that you want to add to your resume, right? Power BI certifications or AWS certifications or Salesforce trainings, right? Think of some of the skills that you can be building while you wait this out, right? Because I agree with your ultimate decision to look for another job. I do. I don't think that that's a bad move given the circumstances. But what I would say is while you are waiting for that right job to materialize, while you are waiting for that right offer, what can you be focused on for your own development so that this isn't wasted time? What does that look like? So make sure that you're taking that ownership as well, and then expand your network internally. Who can you know? Who can you connect with? Who can you build relationships with? All of these things are going to help you build better long-term career satisfaction, even though short-term, it feels like you're stuck in a position that you don't want to be in. All right. Question number 4. This is going to be our last one for today, and it is one of the hardest ones to handle when it's happening to you. And it is one of the most difficult to answer. So we're really gonna challenge me here with this one. So the question that we received is, any advice around a boss who passes my ideas on to my peer for them to deliver and present to senior management? Oof. 1, your boss needs some coaching and you should give them my contact information. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. So this is a hard one, right? Because you have great ideas. You have the ability to execute, and yet you're not being given that opportunity as things are being handed to your peer instead. So part of this is going to be that I think you need to have a direct conversation. All right. This can be hard for many of us. We tend to avoid these types of conversations, but I would ultimately ask them, hey, I've noticed a lot of the time when it comes to execution and follow through, some of the projects will get assigned to Steve. Is there a differentiator in Steve's performance to mine that I can work on closing a gap? Where do you see him as being able to deliver the follow through on these projects more effectively than I can? And how can I improve that perception? Now, this is a hard conversation to have, all right? Your manager is not going to like it any more than you do because it's a little bit of calling them out on BS. But the difference is that you're taking ownership for what does it look like for you to step into that role? What does it look like for you to perform at the same level as your peer so that when projects arise, you're the one assigned to them rather than them being handed off? This can be really challenging because a few things are probably happening behind the scenes. Either 1, your peer, we're going to continue with Steve, has a better reputation than you do. 2, they have better presenting skills or executive presence than you do. 3, Steve asked for a promotion and you didn't, and your boss is trying to make Steve's promotion happen. I see that all the time. Or 4, Steve and your boss have a much closer relationship and your boss trusts Steve more. These are the only 4 reasons why work gets passed off to them instead of you. Now, I know that when you hear this situation, you think it's unfair and it's not cool of them to do this to you. How dare they do this to you? I don't disagree with you necessarily, but Steve has clearly done something to differentiate himself from you in a way that you have not. Take that as you will. What I would say is, while you are in this circumstance, it is important to know what are the gaps in performance between you and Steve. It could come down to simply that he's a better communicator. And so your boss feels more comfortable giving a project to him that's going to get presented to senior management because they know they can lead the meeting, whereas you have not had a chance to display that skill yet. That could be one reason. So you need to understand what is the core issue. The other thing I would encourage you to do is figure out what your personal brand is. What are you good at? Because if you're coming up with all these ideas, right, you're clearly honed in on the issues of the organization. You clearly understand what's happening around you. You're trying to plug gaps. That's a great thing to be. It's indicative of a high-performing employee. But the fact that things then get taken from you and given to someone else, did you drop the ball on something? Was your execution poor on another project? Right? I'm not saying this is all on you. There is a fair amount of your boss making sure that workloads are equal. That's clearly not happening. But where can you take ownership for what's going on as well? And then on the extreme flip side of this, because I can't ever just tell you one thing, I have to give you multiple things to talk about. I would just start doing stuff. Now, this can get dicey very quickly. All right. But say you noticed that there's a gap in between team A and team B, and you're like, oh, we could close that gap and fix our process if we just did X. Rather than tee up X project for your boss and have them hand it off to Steve, I'd say, great, what does it take to do X? Who do I need to engage with? What are the different groups? How can that work get done? And I would just start doing it. And then in your next one-on-one, I would say, hey, boss, I identified a gap between teams A and B. I think we could solve it doing X. I've already had 2 working groups. I'm setting up another one for next week. I'll have a readout probably by the end of the month that I can go through with you to show you the project plan for how we're going to implement this. Now you have a little more ownership, right? If that timeline is still too close to the probability of your boss giving this project to Steve, you can even wait till it's done if you don't need their buy-in. If this is something that you can execute individually, maybe you just do the work. And then at the end of doing the work, hey boss, wanted to let you know I've spent the last 3 months side of desk working on this project to close this gap. It's been a big win. I've been able to communicate with these teams. Wanted to make sure you were aware. Now, obviously, this is going to depend a lot on your relationship with your boss and how you generally work together. I have worked for bosses who would have seen this and said, oh, wow, Kendal really took initiative. That's amazing. Good on her. And you're able to go rock and roll on your own. I've had other bosses who would have sat there and been like, I can't believe you did this. Why didn't you talk to me about it? So if your boss falls in that later camp, it is much more important to do part 1 and to have that tough conversation about where does your performance have gaps compared to the other individuals you work with, right? That's where that's going to become so much more important. But if your boss is more casual and tends to be more complimentary if work is done, then I would say just run with your ideas, execute them, figure out a plan, and then go to them with the results and say, hey, I did all this great work, just wanted you to be informed. And then this is going to be the bonus piece of advice for today's episode. There is a big mindset shift that I think needs to occur for many people between the difference of bragging and informing. Telling your boss you did good work that resulted in XYZ for the firm is not bragging. It is informing. Your boss does not know otherwise. So if you're afraid to tell your boss that you did good work, or afraid to let them know a project update, or afraid to go to them because you don't want it to seem like you're bragging, I can promise you your boss doesn't think that you are. Your boss is genuinely surprised most of the time that you've been doing all of this work and they didn't know about it. So when these situations arise, you need to be willing to then go advocate for yourself. Make sure your boss knows what you're working on, the value that you bring to the organization, what's your impact to the bottom line or to efficiencies or to the team overall. That is your responsibility. You inform them so that they are empowered to then go advocate on your behalf. If you don't tell them, they don't know. And even those of you who are sitting there thinking, well, my boss is in every single meeting. They sit with me on all of these calls. They are working. If you're the one who's delivering on that call, if you're the one who's following up with stakeholders, if you're the one who is executing, they are multitasking and or they're undervaluing your contribution to the project. So it becomes increasingly important for you to be able to get there and advocate for yourself with your boss, with your skip level, with your extended network. So I hope that you guys liked today's episode. There will be more episodes like this in the future. If you have other questions that you would like answered during this honest Q&A, you can submit them at thatcareercoach.net on the website. Just fill out the form. I promise none of your personal information gets shared. We'll just make sure to cover it on the next podcast episode. And then, of course, rate the show, follow, subscribe. That way we can make sure that we're still getting great advice, great guests, and we're able to get you the best advice to help you with your career. Thanks so much for tuning in to That Career Coach, Secrets of a Corporate Game, and we'll be back soon.